Welcome everyone, I'm Adesewa Josh and this is Africa Matters. We begin our program with the impact of global warming in Africa. Stakes are high as world leaders meet to discuss the global climate crisis at the biggest climate summit in Glasgow. Scientists are calling on governments to reduce carbon emissions quickly, hoping to avoid a catastrophic climate disaster by the end of the century. In Sudan, since last Monday's military coup, Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok and several government officials were arrested. The international community has condemned the takeover and called for calm in the country. And then we take you to South Africa, where an entrepreneur is using his local knowledge to create a food delivery system that caters to residents of unnamed streets and informal settlements. With the global average temperature currently heading for an increase of 2.7 degrees Celsius, world leaders at the COP26 conference are striving to set more ambitious emissions reduction goals and slow the climate crisis. In the Paris Agreement, the signatories pledged to reduce carbon emissions by about 16% by 2030. But according to climate scientists, that won't be enough to keep the planet to a maximum temperature of 1.5 degrees Celsius benchmark for the next 5 years. The G20 countries are responsible for about 78% of all carbon emissions, but developing countries suffer the most as they lack the money to adapt to climate change. Africa's UN members are advocating for additional climate financing for the developing world. This could be the last chance to get the world on track to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The COP26 summit brings the dangers of the climate crisis to the forefront and calls on developed countries to take responsibility for cutting down emissions. 197 member states of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change are now facing a really tough challenge. China is the world's top carbon emitter, and the trajectory to meet the global climate goal will be determined by China's near future actions. President Xi Jinping said China planned for an emissions peak in 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, 10 years beyond the target scientists say is needed. The United States is currently the world's second largest carbon emitter, but has historically put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than any other country since the Industrial Revolution. President Joe Biden rejoined the Paris Agreement and has pledged that the country will cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% from 2005 levels by 2030. In 2019, Britain pledged to reach net zero emissions by 2050, and earlier this year committed to a 78% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. The 27-country bloc produces around 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and its emissions have been trending downward for years. Now, the EU has fixed into law targets to cut net emissions by at least 55% by 2030 from 1990 levels and reduce them to zero by 2050. Now, Brazil, India, and South Africa are populous, fast-developing countries with high-polluting economies. Each has called on rich countries to provide more climate financing and have demanded equity through the UN's common but differentiated responsibilities, meaning that wealthy countries that have contributed the most emissions to the atmosphere have a greater responsibility to address it. African countries suffer the most from the impact of the climate crisis, which has been largely caused by wealthier nations. Globally, 49 countries have made net zero pledges, but the details are vague and were not reflected in their formal commitment to support the developing countries. Joining me to discuss the impact of climate change on Africa is Aisha Abdulaziz Adamu, a climate activist trying to preserve the remaining oases in Yobe State, northeast Nigeria. She joins me from the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Thank you so much for making our time to speak to us. How challenging has it been sensitizing people about the impact of global warming and how it is affecting the environment when the people have done very little to contribute to climate change.
Yeah, that is where the problem is. Because it's a natural phenomenon and people don't really relate it to their actions and their behaviors or attitudes too. That the consequences of felling a tree to burn or to cook is far devastating than just mere cutting it. The loss of biodiversity are all issues that have interconnection with how we behave or how we think. And education is never too small or never too much. People have to be made aware, and the awareness has to be sustained that there is a relationship between what we do to the environment and what we get.
Since the continent is largely on the receiving end of this climate crisis, will the little changes you're asking Africans to make prepare or protect them even from these extreme weather conditions you've described?
Well, Africa, as a continent, I think we produce just 4% of the total emission. The wealthier nations are those that produce or that emit 45 to 50%. That's China and US. So the only way we as a nation or as a continent can achieve more in Glasgow is when all the negotiators, I mean the African group negotiators, stand and speak with a voice, a single voice, that enough is enough. International and multinational companies and countries must own up to the responsibilities of their emissions, and then also emphasize the Article 4 on climate finance, where the African nations or the poorer nations and developing nations will receive climate finance so as to be a way of adapting or mitigating these climate crises.
As the world looks for solutions to address global heating, at the UN's COP26 Climate Summit, TRT World Sarah takes a look at how Gabon has become one of the world's few net absorbers of carbon and what the Central African country is doing to protect that status.
This is one of Gabon's mangrove swamps. It's not just an area of untouched natural beauty. The towering trees here absorb huge amounts of greenhouse gas, making the Central African country one of the world's few net absorbers of carbon.
The mangrove ecosystem, we have really to be careful about them, not to destroy them, because if we destroy mangrove ecosystem, then we will emit a lot of carbon from the atmosphere.
Some of these trees are more than 65 meters high, taller than the Sydney Opera House, making them the world's tallest mangroves. As the globe struggles to curb climate change, the importance of protecting these carbon-absorbing trees is even more acute. Across the estuary from the mangrove-rich Pongara National Park, near the growing Gabonese capital Libreville, and this is all that remains of a former swamp. It was illegally cleared for construction. As well as storing carbon, the swamps are rich in wildlife and serve as natural flood defences. Their destruction not only risks increasing carbon emissions, but raises the threat of flooding for the nearby civilian population.
As you can see, the houses over there are in a basin of sorts, and when the heavy rains come, the water can rise.
Andrea Minkwe is the manager of a team of rangers that are helping raise public awareness about the importance of protecting Gabon's mangroves.
We are hoping that with time, people will understand more and more the importance of mangroves, because I always say in my talks, if we destroy all those mangroves, if we destroy all this forest, water will replace it. If we want to build, we will build on water. We are going to end up in water. If we want to do agriculture, everything will be drowned. So it's important to maintain the mangroves.
In the last 20 years, mangroves have recovered from being one of the world's fastest shrinking habitats to one of the best protected, with more than 40% in a conservation area, according to a report by the Global Mangrove Alliance. But the mangrove ecosystem faces growing threats from construction for housing and tourism. And experts say more work will need to be done to ensure these carbon-absorbing natural wonders remain protected. Sarah Firth, TRT World.
And still to come on Africa Matters.
I'm Matiba Mahlaji, and I'll be showing you how these locally manufactured scooters navigate through South Africa's maze of unmapped, nameless township streets to deliver fast food, a service that never existed.
The World Health Organization says more than 60% of babies are born prematurely in Africa and South Asia. Thousands of the premature infants die every year due to lack of health infrastructures and medical professionals. But one engineer in Cameroon is trying to improve the mortality rate by creating unique equipment, as Usman Aliyu Uba reports.
Sergei Armel in Juju is leading a team of engineers to develop life-saving equipment in Cameroon to reduce premature baby mortality. With less than 100 active incubators for several thousand hospitals across the country, Cameroonian authorities say about 22,000 babies or 3 in 1,000 infants die every year. Now, Sergei Armel in Juju's technology is becoming a lifeline for thousands of premature babies and their parents.
First, it looks like a normal incubator, meaning premature babies are in a soundproof space. There are ideal thermal conditions for the baby's development, and it's all done through electrical regulation. We wanted to ensure interactivity and allow monitoring from distance, as well as close monitoring.
The incubator sells for $3,400, less than half the price of those imported from Europe. The hybrid system operates by using both electricity and solar energy. The incubator allows temperature, air circulation, as well as water level to be easily monitored by doctors and nurses through a smartphone.
This incubator has various benefits because we can monitor the babies from a distance to prevent infections and the comings and goings of people in the room. And since the mother doesn't always have access to the room, being at home or outside, she can monitor her baby.
When I gave birth, his weight was under 2 kilograms. He was 1.8 kilograms. The center where I gave birth recommended this place to me. Since his birth 2 weeks ago, he now has a good weight. His skin color, which wasn't looking good, is now more pinkish. It's already a good thing, and he also cries normally. For me, that is good. It is very good.
Injuju hopes in the future to expand the brand to other African countries to help reduce premature infants' deaths on the continent. Usman Aliyu Uba, TRT World.
Most of South Africa's townships and rural areas do not have street names. The settlements were created at the height of South Africa's segregation laws before 1994, which kept most of them away from development and economic opportunities. But in post-apartheid South Africa, technology has empowered many people in these areas and created new opportunities for businesses to find their way for a former resident. Matuba Masachi reports.
24-year-old Hudirachete Mohajane knows what it's like to grow up in a township in Pretoria. And without standard addresses or accurate maps, getting simple services like food delivery can be a challenge. But this experience sparked an idea for Mohajane to create the company Delivery Speed.
One is we're in the townships, they're not here, right? And as I mentioned, the reason they're not here is because of the maps, right? They're struggling to figure that out. We are in the industry of the last mile, and the last mile in the township has always been the biggest issue. So we came up with innovative solutions of how can we master the last mile and make sure that all our deliveries get to the time within an hour.
Statistics South Africa says more than 47 million South Africans in urban areas live in townships and informal settlements. And even though life has improved for many people, getting around can still cause confusion.
Every time I call the customer and I ask for direction, because if I grew up in this area, I know most of the places.
Delivery Speed simply means speedy delivery. The company is only 3 months old, but it's already delivered nearly 2,500 orders via WhatsApp. It charges 15% on all deliveries. There's also a 70-cent fee depending on distance, which gets paid directly to the drivers.
I love delivery speed. I don't have to go through the process taxes, and the fact that it is the first best service actually we ever got Mokasi. So trust me, the fact that I receive Spur, McDonald's and whatever in the comfort of my own home. Trust me, delivery speed is the thing.
Delivery Speed company says its business model aims to bridge the divide between the rich and poor people in South Africa, not just with the people they reach, but also in the service they provide.
It uses electric scooters to save on rising fuel costs and advertises through local community radio stations. Delivery Speed operates in 2 of the biggest townships in the city, but Mohajani says there's still room for growth. The company currently employs 8 people who earn about $100 a week. Mohajani hopes to hire more drivers, expand into more areas, and has ordered more electric scooters to pave the way for more opportunities in township communities. Matuba Mahlachi, TRT World, Hammanskraal, South Africa.
And now for a roundup of what's making news across the continent. From the African Union to the United Nations, the world reacted with alarm after a military takeover in Sudan, where armed forces detained the Prime Minister and other civilian members of the cabinet. The chaos followed weeks of tensions between military and civilian figures that have ruled under a power-sharing agreement since former President Omar al-Bashir was ousted in 2019. A military officer dissolved the transitional government, while opponents of the takeover took to the streets, where gunfire, deaths and injuries have been reported. Nigeria became the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to launch a central bank-backed digital currency, or CBDC. The West African nation joins China and a few others using or piloting central bank-regulated electronic currency. Nigeria has seen booming interest in cryptocurrencies as people look for ways to avoid the weakening naira and combat high cost of living and unemployment in Africa's most populous country. While cryptocurrencies are out of government control, the e-naira is a legal tender regulated by the national financial system. Turkey says it's prepared to boost defense and security cooperation with Chad as the African nation faces terrorists and other armed groups. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with Chad's visiting transitional president Mohamed Idris Deby Itno in Ankara. The leaders discussed bilateral relations and regional issues, and Ankara says it will support Chad in its transitional period. Still on Climate Watch, we head to Somalia in East Africa. The country ranks among the world's most vulnerable to climate change. 60% of the population live in rural areas as nomadic or semi-nomadic pastoralists, which makes climate crisis an imminent threat to the people's livelihoods and way of life. Senes Island has the story.
Uba Adan Juma moved to the city 3 years ago after all her goats died in a drought. She struggles to support her family in the new setting.
When you own something, you stay for that. So we are there for the livestock, but when they all died, we had to move to town for water and employment, even if it's irregular employment. When we had our livestock, there was a huge difference. We at least had that. We were using them. Now we don't have anything. Some days we find what we need in town, other days we don't.
Tens of thousands of climate migrants are on the move in Somalia, where environmental extremes are forcing waves of herders and farmers off the land towards cities ill-equipped to host them. Researchers say in recent years, natural disasters have been the main reason for displacement in Somalia, rather than the conflict that's been going on for more than 20 years. Yurub Abdi Jama is also among those who lost their herds, and she had to join the exodus.
I was born and raised in rural areas where we would take care of livestock within my family. The difficult times forced us to move away from that. We lived there originally. We are from there, in the mountains, taking care of livestock. That was our life. We are people that the drought has pushed out. we would never have walked away from that life that we loved.
According to the UNHCR, fierce and frequent droughts and floods have uprooted more than 3 million Somalis since 2016. Hassan Hussein Ibrahim from Save the Children says time is not on their side and families need new skills to start afresh.
Due to the recurrent shocks, drought, and the different climate change phenomena, it seems like people will need to diversify their livelihood source of income. They also need to adapt with the changing situation of the climate change, either sending their children to school, adapting with the life in the urban context.
But for people who spend their whole life farming, adapting to an urban life is easier said than done. Sena Saylan, TRT World.
To Kenya now, where a mobile application is providing a platform for farmers to hire tractors more easily when needed. The app, known as Hello Tractor, is helping farmers increase their production at a lower cost. Dominic Brian Omondi has the details.
You can select an implement to be attached.
Like the ride-hailing app Uber, Hello Tractor has arrived in Africa. It's the latest app connecting farmers to tractors with the push of a button. Founder Jehal Oliver says most of their clients are small-scale farmers who cannot invest in heavy machinery.
Nearly all farmers in the Africa region are reliant on rain-fed agricultural systems. This means that they have to plant on time in order to maximize their yield. There's simply not enough labor available in these rural communities to ensure farmers have access to the labor that they need to plant on time and maximize their productivity. That's where Hello Tractor comes in.
Upon booking, the app connects farmers to the nearest available tractor. The price of plowing a piece of land ranges between $18 to $31 per 4,000 square meters.
If I plow my land using a tractor, I can harvest up to 35 bags of maize. However, when I use only my hands, I can only harvest 10 bags of maize, which is a loss to a farmer like me.
And it's not just farmers who are enjoying the benefits. The app has also improved business for tractor owners like Dominic Kimani. They receive 90% of the fee charged to the farmer, while the other 10% goes to the company.
Back in the day, we used to park our tractors at shopping center and patiently wait for customers. However, with this application, it's easy to find work.
Hello Tractor currently has about 3,000 tractors on its platform. Jehail Oliver hopes they can reach as many farmers as possible and be part of the revolution in food production across Africa and beyond. Dominic Brano-Mondi, TRT World.
Before we wrap the show, let's take a look at what some of you had to say about the stories we've covered. Abdi Sharif says, I am forever grateful to Turkey for standing by my country through rough times when everyone else in the world forgot about us. Long live Turkey and Somalia. Syed Shah Nawaz says, President Erdogan is laying a foundation for the future of Turkey. His vision is very far-sighted. And finally, here's our weekly African City profile. In this episode, we go to Oloibiri in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. It's the birthplace of the country's oil industry, but it has paid a steep environmental price ever since. That's our show this week from me and the team here in Istanbul. As always, let me know what you think about the stories you've seen on this episode. Share your thoughts and suggestions on what you want us to cover on Twitter using the hashtag #AfricaMatters. Or you can also reach out to me on my personal handle. It's @Adesewa Josh. This week, we'll leave you with images from the impact of global warming in Africa.